Welcome to A Change of Heart podcast. I'm your host, Angel Walston. And in this space, we navigate life together. We ask the hard questions like, what is the truth you haven't told? But most importantly, we grow together. And sometimes that leads to a change of heart. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another week of A Change of Heart podcast. I am your host, Angel Walston, and today we have what I feel like is going to be somewhat of a heavier topic. And so I wanted to start off with a fun question of the day, something that we don't have to think too hard about, something very lighthearted. So the question of the day is, it's the movie about your life, okay? You get to pick who the actor and actress is who plays your parents. Who are going to play your parents in your biopic? So I was thinking about this. This was actually one of the questions that I saw it somewhere on Instagram, and I was like, I want to do this for a question of the day. So I would love to have Tracee Ellis Ross to play my mom. She just seems like she would be so much fun. Just to I'm going to be on set because this is the movie about my life. So I want to be there to direct things and whatnot. So I don't know. I just feel like she would be so much fun. And I was thinking about who would I want to play my dad? And I keep going back and forth with it, but I'm going to say Jamie Foxx. I just think that would be really cool to have the two of them. I feel like I haven't seen them in anything together. So I don't know. I just think that would be a great pairing. So you all know the drill by now. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel, you can leave your answer in the comment section, or you can answer it in my stories on Instagram at Angel C. Walston. All right, ladies, let's go ahead and have us a heart-to-heart. This episode is definitely going to be one that is going to make you do some self-reflecting, hopefully. But my prayer and hope for this episode is that you don't walk away from it feeling like, I should send this to somebody, this doesn't apply to me. Or you feel as though you're being attacked, because that is not my intent. And I hope you all know that we've built a space here, right, where it's a safe space for us to be able to have the difficult conversations, talk about real life stuff, and to be able to acknowledge hey, I have some things I need to address. I have some things I need to deal with. And so I'm hoping that as you all are listening to today's episode, that you are able to take some things away from it that may help you to continue to grow and be the woman who you've always been created to be, because ultimately what this is about, y'all already know what I'm going to say. It's about us being whole, being healed, and being authentic. And in order for us to do that, there's also some things that have to be corrected along the way. So with that being said, y'all all right? Y'all good? With that being said, you all know, as you can see by the title of this episode, that we're going to be talking about the mishandling of character flaws. And the reason why I titled that in the whole I am who I am, because I feel like we have seen so many people use that phrase of I am who I am, you have to take me as I am, people should accept me as I am, if you don't love me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. And we have allowed ourselves to utilize that language to keep us in error and to keep us in cycles that are unhealthy. And we are the source and cause of what is unhealthy. It's not everybody else. It's not your mama and them. It's you. And we have to have those honest conversations as well, because we want to ultimately be the best version of ourselves. And in giving grace to the fact that as you have the desire to be the best version of yourself, you're still growing into the best version of yourself. You ain't always going to get it right. There's definitely space for grace, but I also want us to be willing to have those hard conversations with ourselves. And so it starts with me. We're going to have some heart-to-hearts today. There may be some story times, but we're going to have these conversations because I think we do need to grow from this idea of take me as I am, to acknowledge that maturity recognizes that there are some things that you need to change, and that people don't have to accept it and accept you as you are, when as you are is unhealthy. As you are, dare I say it, the buzzword, toxic. And so we have to be willing to acknowledge the things that are really hindering us in our relationships, that are hindering us professionally, that are hindering us personally from being where we actually want to be. So I want to share some things with you all today that I'm becoming more aware of and just realizing that I need to prove on in hopes that it'll help you all to process any character or personality flaws in a healthy way. So in the episode, I believe it was the last episode, yes, on Lessons from Therapy with one of my friends, I talked about how one of my lessons is that you can be self-aware yet oblivious to ways that you are in error. And I wanted to revisit this because a lot of times as we're talking about this idea of being self-aware, we feel like that in itself is enough. And I want to give you all the perfect example as to why that in itself is not enough. So y'all know I watch Married at First Sight. I have not been watching the last 2 episodes because this season, y'all, is a train wreck. But I do still watch and listen to the different recaps of the episodes. And so one of my favorite that I always watch is The Ball and the Beautiful with Kev on Stage, Miss Kev on Stage, That Chick Angel, and then her husband, Marcus. And so in the, not the last episode, but episode before last, Melissa Fredericks, aka Mrs. Kev on Stage, said something so profound. And I think that it definitely flicked a switch for me. And let's break this down, okay? So in their discussion, in their recap of Married at First Sight, they were talking about one of the couples, Jacob and Haley. Very long story short, Haley feel like she trying, but baby girl really ain't trying like that. And so one of the things that Melissa Frederick said really helped me to think about self-awareness in a different way. She said this thing, take note of it because it was so good. There's a difference in being self-reflective or self-aware and taking accountability. So there's a difference in being self-aware and you actually taking accountability for what you are aware of. And so the example that she gave is that when Haley is confronted with her behavior towards her husband, her response is always just like, this is what I do, this is who I am, I shut down. Like she's aware of the fact that she shuts down. So she said from day one, her family and friends, as they were talking to her husband, told him from day one, when she gets overwhelmed, when she feels pressed, when she's anxious, she's going to shut down. So she's aware that this is something that she does. So what Melissa said is that in her saying and having this mindset of this is who I am, I shut down, when I get overwhelmed, when I feel like you're pressing me, this is what I do, this is who I am. So what Melissa said is the other side of that and growth is saying that's what I do and I need to work on that. Y'all catch that second part there? This is what I do and I need to work on that. Self-awareness can lead to accountability, but it's not the same as taking accountability. And so my first point that I want you all to consider is that self-awareness is the starting point. It is not the finish line. Self-awareness in itself, it is simply just not enough. And I know that a lot of times we feel like, I'm so reflective, I'm so aware of how I am, what I do, and what I say, and that's great. But there's something on the other side of that, of you being self-aware. So you're aware that you shut down over here, but then there's this and that needs to be attached to it of, okay, I'm aware that I do this, and I'm also aware that that's really not okay. And we tend to justify things simply because this is what I've always done. This is how it's always been. This is how I've always responded. No one else has said anything about it, but that doesn't make it okay, and it also doesn't make it healthy. And so we have to be in a space where we're willing to acknowledge that although this has been my pattern, although this is what I have always done, although this is what I am used to, it's time to interrupt that pattern because it's not actually getting me the results that I want. Instead, it's actually acting as a stumbling block. It's actually acting as a hindrance because I'm not growing, because I'm refusing to an extent to allow myself to step outside of what has always been, what I've always known, what I've always ended up reverting to. And I think it's so important for us to understand that, especially when it comes to our patterns, because the thing about a pattern is that a pattern repeats itself, okay? A pattern will always repeat itself. That's what makes it a pattern. And we have to understand that the problem with the pattern is that it repeats itself, but it doesn't change. You don't get different results. It just repeats itself. And some of us have been holding on to things and holding on to patterns in our life simply because it's what's familiar. And what we tend to do is when we feel uncomfortable, when we feel anxious, when we feel challenged, we revert back to what we know, and what we know is not always the healthiest. And I just think that it's really important for us to be able to recognize that it's really good for us to be able, it's a great thing for us to be able to be self-aware and to reflect on our behaviors and our actions. But when we step back and actually take the time to think about, okay, what am I actually doing with the information that I'm so aware of? Pause for that. Like, what am I actually doing with this information? Because take this into consideration. There are tons of things in this world that we are aware of that are problematic. I think that would be a fair statement, right? We can look at different things in the world: poverty, the gap in pay wages, employment, homelessness. There's literally a list of things that we can physically see are problematic, are issues within this world. And think about it in the sense of the people who are in the higher up positions, who have the ability to make the decisions and changes to the different things that we see to be a problem. We know that these people are aware of it, but they're not doing anything to change it. Think about how frustrating that is. Now consider how people who are the closest to you, people who you interact with, people who you have conversations with consistently, consider how frustrating it may be for you to be so self-aware, yet you don't make any changes. Y'all see where I'm going with this? Did y'all see what I just did right there? It's important for you to be able to recognize that. And full disclosure, as I have been watching Married at First Sight and kind of following the Jacob and Haley storyline, I will say this: I do not fully relate to Haley because homegirl be tripping for real. But I can relate to her in the sense of my response for a lot of things is shut down. Sis will shut down quick and in a hurry. And what I've realized is that a part of my shutting down is also a response to feeling overwhelmed, feeling anxious, feeling uncomfortable, being in a position where it's something that I don't want to talk about. But what ends up happening is I shut down and I isolate, and I actually shut people out who have good intentions. It's not people who need to be shut out, but I have a tendency to respond in that way. And so for me, in thinking about this idea of that self-awareness is the starting point, it's not the finish line. I'm now having to really sit with that and say, okay, Angel, you've been self-aware of the fact that you tend to shut down, you tend to keep people at an arm's distance, but now it is a time for me to take accountability for myself and really step back and think, okay, what is it that I need to do to change that? Because although I've been doing this for a really long time, it's not okay. It's not healthy. And so I need to be willing to make the changes so that I have a different response, so that I learn how to adapt in those situations that make me uncomfortable, that make me anxious, that make me overwhelmed. So that way, instead of shutting down, I have another plan of how I can respond in a way that is healthy. Hopefully that makes sense. The second thing is, I believe I've talked about this in another episode, but I really couldn't remember. And so we're just going to revisit again because that's my business. The second thing is that it's great to have boundaries, but be willing to acknowledge how much of your boundaries are rooted in a defense mechanism. I'm pretty confident that we've talked about this before, but it needed to be brought back up again because I want to say a couple of years ago, maybe, there was like this huge thing about setting boundaries. Like, you have to have boundaries. You can't let people treat you anyway. You have to make sure that you set boundaries. And I think that that is so important as well. I'm not knocking it. I'm not saying that you should not have boundaries, because it is absolutely necessary for you to have healthy boundaries. The only thing that I would say in regards to setting boundaries is, at times we can make the mistake of setting boundaries that we call boundaries when in reality it's actually a trauma response. Can we talk about that? we call it a boundary when in reality it's actually a trauma response. And so what you end up doing is you create boundaries with people that trigger things for you, that it's not really an unhealthy trigger, is something that is unhealed that you have not dealt with. So now every time that you face this type of trigger in different people, you cut those people off, when the people aren't really the issue. It's the issue that you have not fully healed from that is the issue. And so as a result of that, we call ourselves setting up boundaries as a means to protect ourselves, when in reality we end up pushing people off or cutting people off unnecessarily. And something that I will say about myself is that I'm very much so an observer. I pay attention to everything. I don't speak on everything that I see, but best believe I see a lot and I've clocked it. Like, I'm very much so an observer. I pay attention to a lot of things. And as a result of that, I'm very much so aware that I tend to, well, let me step back and I'll say this and then it'll come full circle. When I think about everyone who I am friends with at this point, when I say friends, I mean like we are close friends. We talk on the phone, we spend time together, we see each other in person, we do life together, we talk about life, we talk about real issues. When they ask me how I'm doing, it's not, oh, I'm fine, I'm blessed in the Lord. It's like, girl, like when I say friends, I mean those types of relationships. When I think about those friendships in my life, I can honestly say that every single one of my very close friendships, it took us years to even become friends. Not best friends, not close friends, but just friends. And it was on me. I can say that full transparency, it was on me. And I jokingly said something to one of my friends, I want to say maybe like a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago. And I got so convicted in it because I was saying it as a joke. And then I realized, but Angel, you're really not joking. And the thing that I said was, you know how when they say that a person is innocent until proven guilty. So my thing is, a lot of people will trust someone until they give them a reason to not trust them. Whereas I tend to distrust people until you give me a reason to show that I can trust you. And although I wouldn't say trust is not the best word for it, but I know for myself, I do tend to keep people, as I was saying earlier, at an arm's distance. I tend to keep them at a distance. Let me observe you. Let me see what you're about. Let me see what your intentions are. And so it's like I automatically go in with this mindset of, let me see what you're about before I allow you to get close to me. And as a result of that, I do believe that there are probably people who I could have built significant relationships with by now that I have not. There's also probably people who I could really allow them to be a part of my life, do life with me, and love me well. And I have not given them the opportunity to do that because I can be very closed off at times. And although that's not my intention, I have to be aware enough to recognize that my intention, I don't want to say it doesn't mean anything, but I can sit here and say all day, every day that that's not my intention, but that does not dismiss or remove the fact of it is what it is. And we have to be really big about calling a thing a thing. That's my favorite thing to say. Call a thing a thing. We got to call it for what it is. And so something that I am really trying to be intentional about is allowing people to do life with me. Because I've said this before, I truly believe that there are people who feel like they are close to me, but don't feel like I am close to them, in the sense that they feel like, you know, if I needed to talk to her, I could reach out to her, I can tell her things. And let me say this, I feel like people share a lot with me because they realize at some point that if you tell me something, I'm not going to repeat it. Like I'm very big about confidentiality. I'm very big about, if you share something in confidence with me, I know the detriment that can come with repeating something, especially something serious. And whether it's serious to me or not is irrelevant. But repeating something that was said in confidence, that is detrimental to people's, not just your relationship with them, but that can very much so impact their relationship with other people down the line. Way off topic here, Angel. Bring it back. But I think that that is a part of the reason why people feel very comfortable sharing things with me. But I realize that although people feel very comfortable sharing personal things with me, I don't feel very comfortable sharing personal things with any and everyone. And it really doesn't have anything to do with the person themselves. It's more so, for me, it takes me time to build up to sharing. And the crazy thing is, y'all know, I share a whole lot about myself on here, the internet. So literally majority of my life story is in a whole book. We have a lot of information about myself that is very public on my YouTube channel. And so there is a lot of things that I share. I'm very open about a lot of things, but when it comes to building relationships, I've realized that I have created a boundary for myself that says I'm not going to get close to you, or I'm not going to give you the opportunity to get to know me in a more intimate way until I feel comfortable, but also recognizing that what I'm using as the measure to feel comfortable is not even fully giving people the opportunity to show up in that way for me, if that makes sense. And so I'm having to be aware that I have created this boundary that ultimately is a defense mechanism, and is not even fully coming from a place of being hurt or mistreated by people in the past. It's coming from several spaces, which that's a conversation for therapy, but it's coming from several different places. And ultimately, I have to work through those things, because what I will end up doing is I will hinder myself from experiencing the fullness of relationships. And I'm not even speaking of romantic relationships, relationships in general on any side of this spectrum, because I don't fully allow myself to receive love in the way that people are capable of giving it, but also not fully being able to give that to people. And so I recognize that this could be a whole nother episode in itself, but the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I always tell you all, as we're going through these different topics, the message always hits the messenger first. So as I'm sharing these things with you, as we're having these conversations, I don't want you all to ever feel like I'm sharing it from a space of, I got it all figured out. Because listen, sis ain't got it all figured out. I am sis. Sis is me. I do not have it all figured out. I'm very much so going through it right in the middle with you all as well. And I want to share those moments of going through it as well, because I don't ever want to give the impression that I have everything figured out, because I don't. With that being said, in this idea of thinking about your boundaries and acknowledging how they may be rooted in a defense mechanism, also consider the fact of how your boundaries, y'all not gonna like me for this, but we gotta say it. Some of y'all have created boundaries and you're calling it healthy, when in reality it is controlling, honey. We gotta call a thing a thing. We also have to be willing to recognize that you can set boundaries, but just because someone chooses not to obey your boundary, it does not necessarily mean they're in the wrong if your boundary is crazy. Or if your boundary is something where you're trying to control things. That's not going to fly with people. Like, we also have to call a thing when it comes to that as well. Some of us have created boundaries not out of the sake of creating a healthy boundary. It's literally to control a narrative, to control a person, to control a space, and that's not okay as well. So you have to be willing to acknowledge, first, be willing to acknowledge that, but also be willing to receive when somebody tells you that. And that's my next point, is being willing to have conversations with people who you trust and who are unbiased, who don't care about hurting your feelings at times, who can correct you. Because I feel like the number one mistake that we can make as people who are very self-aware is that we equate being self-aware to knowing everything, and you don't know everything. You don't have it all figured out. And as I'm saying it to you, I'm saying it to me as well. Because there are times where I think I got everything figured out, but I don't, okay? God quickly humbles me and reminds me that I do not. It's so important and so necessary for you to be willing to have conversations with people who you can receive from. Because here's the other thing too. Let me say this for anybody who feels like, you know, this is not my struggle, but I know somebody who struggles with this, and let me go have a conversation with them and tell them about themselves. You got to understand, one, you have to be in a position where you are willing to receive that from someone. And two, also the catch-22 here, also be willing to accept that sometimes that person might have it wrong too. So be willing, but also ask God to give you wisdom to be able to discern, okay, what is it that I really need to change? What is it that I really need to fix? Prime example of this, this was a while ago, but I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and I knew her heart was in the right place. I knew she intended well, but she made a comment in response to something that I said, not rebuking me per se, but trying to correct me in a sense. And the correction it was off. I knew she meant well. I knew her heart behind it, so I wasn't offended by it. But I will say one of my biggest frustrations is feeling misunderstood. And so in having that conversation, I felt like what I said and what she interpreted what I said were very different. And as a result of how she interpreted what I was saying, she responded in a way to correct me in something that wasn't necessary. And so I wouldn't say take it for a grain of salt, but also be willing to allow somebody to correct you and to consider it. Let me say that. Take the time to consider it. Is this something I need to work on? Is this something I need to change? Is this something that I need to fix? And be willing to do that, because a lot of times we will focus on offense before we will focus on, could they possibly be right? So take the time to process it without allowing yourself to get into your head or to focus on, well, they just being a hater. Child, everybody is not a hater, okay? There are people who want to see you do well. There are people who are truly rooting for you, and you don't want to ruin a friendship, a relationship, because you took offense to something that was from someone who was really looking at your best interest and really trying to help you to grow and to be willing to mature in an area. Another thing that I would say is to be willing to acknowledge when your response or behavior is rooted in pride and ego. Can we talk about it? Can we talk about it? We have to be willing to acknowledge that sometimes, even in our best intentions, we can put ourselves in a position where we allow our pride and our ego to get the best of us. One of the things that one of my pastors says is that Pastor Ashley always says, pride will keep you in error and have you thinking that you're right. It will have you wrong, but convince you that you are right. And for some of us, when we have this whole mindset of take me as I am who I am, I do what I do, we don't even, I won't say this. Here's the kicker. We realize that what we do is wrong. We realize our attitude is nasty. We realize that we overthink things at times. We're self-aware, right? We're self-reflective, but we would rather stay in this space of I'm wrong and I'm going to tell everybody that they're wrong and I'm going to let everybody have it because I should be able to speak my mind, this, that, and the fourth. And we don't even recognize that you are willing to stay in error than to admit that, hey, this is something I really need to work on. This is something I really need to change. And this is something that I would encourage you all to think about. Question whether or not your pride or ego is at the forefront when you find yourself constantly having failed relationships. Because something that we always have to take into consideration when it comes to failed relationships is that there are two parties in any type of relationship, at least two. And at some point, you have to look at who is the common denominator. It's always going to be you. Just in case you were not good at math, algebra was not your thing, It's always going to be you. One more time for the people in the back. It's always going to be you, boo. You will always be the common denominator in your relationships. And I think it's important to be willing to step back and acknowledge, like, okay, if all of these relationships are failing in the same way, I need to step back and look at myself and either question, okay, what is it about me that I am attracting these type of people into my life? What is it about me that these relationships keep ending in the same pattern? What's going on here? But what your pride and your ego will do is it will say, everybody's out to get me. Everybody else is the problem. It's nothing for me to look at here. But you have to understand, once again, you're the common denominator. And if you're the common denominator, then you have to be willing to step back and look at, like, okay, if I'm the one that's always here, regardless of who comes and goes, let me fix the base. Let me fix the foundation. Let me fix the denominator. So whoever is next to come into the picture, we have a fresh start. We have a fresh foundation. We're not carrying something like the last number, their baggage or their issues and their stuff. We're able to start fresh. But when you have a pride and ego issue, you don't see it like that because you're so focused on how it's everybody else's fault. It's everybody else's problem. Everybody else is being mean to you. Everybody else is mistreating you. At some point, you got to look at you. And you got to remove the yes men in your corner, because if all you have are people who are telling you, oh no, they wrong, it's them, you right, and they know that you're in error, that is a problem. If you have people in your life who have never told you were wrong, who have never pointed out, like, actually, you probably shouldn't have said that, you probably shouldn't have responded like that, or this is something I think you could improve upon on, that's a problem, y'all. If you only have people who tell you how great and amazing you are, those are not friends, those are cheerleaders. It's great to have people who support you, but that support also has to be in support of you growing, in support of you becoming whole, healed, and authentic. And until you can get people, and let me also say this, I'll come back to that thought, but just as it is important to have those people in your life who can say those things, consider the fact that if you don't have those people, is it because you have cut them off? Can we talk about that too? Because sometimes we will be in a space where anybody who corrects us, anybody who tells us something that we don't want to hear, we cut them off. We think that they're against us. Listen, people who truly love you, who truly support you, who truly want to see you become all that you were created to be, they're going to tell you when you're in error. They're going to tell you when you're not right. They're going to tell you when they are seeing something, especially when it's a pattern that is something that could potentially be detrimental to you. You have to be mature enough, however, to receive that. And you also have to create a space for people where they can tell you something from a place of love, that you don't take offense every time, or that you don't get to a place where when they're trying to open up and tell you something that they see in error, that you make it into this whole big ordeal where it's like everybody's trying to hurt my feelings, everybody's out to get me. That in itself will make people not want to talk to you. They won't try and bring those things to you because they feel as though you're going to, dare I say it, play the victim in something that you need to be corrected in. I'm going to jump off of that. I said I was going to come back to my thought, but I forgot what it was. The last point that I wanted to say is, in thinking about this whole idea of I am who I am, take me as I am, consider that you are who you are. But maybe it's time to do it differently. Maybe it's time to try something different than what you've been doing and just see what your results are. We have to recognize that we will get the same results every single time we do the same thing we've been doing. And I would encourage you to try to do it differently. 30 days. Just see what happens. 30 days, okay? See what happens. Be willing to do it differently. Be open to doing it differently. Be willing to have a conversation, and it could be with a therapist, with your friends, with your mama, with your sister, your cousins, whoever. But be willing to have a conversation with someone. And listen, let me preface it with this. Everybody cannot handle this. I'm not encouraging you to do this unless you are prepared for what the response may be. Be willing to ask someone who knows you well, who will be honest with you, who will give you an unbiased response. What is an area that you think I can improve on? Start with something simple. We ain't got to make it super deep. As your friend, as my friend, what is an area that you feel like I could improve on or that would make me a better person? Like I said, everybody's not ready to have those conversations, because this is what I want you to understand. Well, let me say this. I'm the type of person, I will never give someone feedback unless I have like a really close relationship with them. I will never give you feedback on something unless you ask my opinion on it. Hear me clearly on this. If you ask me my opinion on something, I am not going to hold back on it because you've asked me my opinion. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. I'm not going to downplay it and make it pretty for you. I'm going to give you my honest opinion about things. I'm never going to be rude, disrespectful, or anything like that. My goal is never to hurt people's feelings. But if you ask my opinion about something, I'm going to give it to you. And so I share that because there may be people who have never told you what they think or what their suggestion may be, and now you have given them the opportunity to do so, and their response might not be what you think it would be. It might not be as simple or nice as you may think it may be, but recognize that if you're going to ask that question, give people the space to be able to answer honestly without you taking offense or without you getting your feelings hurt. Because when you respond in a way that is defensive, it makes that person be like, you know what, don't even worry about it. I don't even want to talk to you about it. I don't even want to tell you. So just keep that in mind. I am not saying that you have to do this. I'm just saying if you are ready to do so, and it doesn't make you immature if you choose not to do so. If you are ready to do so, do this with someone who you trust, who you have a relationship with, not somebody you beefing with. Like, come on. Do it with someone who you really value and respect their opinion about you, what they would have to say, and just be willing to take in what they say. I know it's very difficult, and I know it's going to be challenging to say detach your emotions from it, because I get it. I get it. That's going to be hard. But just keep in mind that when you ask someone's opinion, give them space to give it to you, okay? And what I mean by give them space, I don't mean like don't talk to them for a couple of days. I mean give them the room to be able to share their experience with you in a way that you say, okay, maybe wasn't expecting that, but I hear what you're saying and I received that. Thank you for your feedback. It does not have to be like that, not whatsoever. But I do just want to encourage you, because a lot of times what we end up doing is, as we are so self-aware, because self-aware people think that we can fix ourselves all the time too, because we think we have all the answers. In our self-awareness, what we tend to do is we think about, okay, what are my issues? What are the things that I do that are problematic that I should probably fix? We answer that ourselves, and then we choose how to fix it and how to correct it. Here's the catcher. As I said in the therapy episode, and as I said at the beginning of this episode, you can be self-aware yet still be oblivious to the ways that you are in error. So you can be super self-aware of all of these things you need to change and fix and do, and you can do that. But there are people who know you very well that can see things that you may be oblivious to. And so although it's great to have this self-awareness and to have those conversations and to think about these things and to process with yourself, it's equally as important to process that with someone else, because sometimes just having a conversation with someone helps you to be able to connect dots that you can't connect. So a little funny story time. I'm going to actually change the scenario just because it's one of my clients. So for confidentiality reasons, it can't be traced back. But I had a client who had told me that him and his girlfriend had broke up. And for this this fictional story that I'm changing it to, the reason they broke up was because of infidelity. That's what we'll say, okay? And he said that, he really loved this girl. He wanted them to get back together. And what he was going to do to get her back was he was going to buy new clothes and he was going to get him a job. And that was going to get her back. And so in the conversation, I'm like, okay, but it appears that she left because of the infidelity. So it doesn't seem like the fact that she didn't like the way that you dress or that you didn't have a job, like that didn't seem to be an issue, right? It seems like the infidelity was the issue. The reason why I bring that up is because a lot of times we're over here fixing our clothes, getting us a job, when the problem is you don't know how to stop cheating. Y'all get what I'm saying? And so as a result of that, you're fixing something that does not fix the problem. You're improving something about yourself over here, which is, that's great, that's cute, but we still have this issue of infidelity. We still have this issue over here that getting a job, buying new clothes, that's not going to fix it for you. You have to be willing to address this issue right here versus changing things that I don't want to say they don't matter, but ultimately does not solve the issue. I bring that up because in having conversations with people, it helps to expose the holes in your version of fixing something. It helps you to be able to see that, okay, I'm going to buy new clothes, I'm going to get a job, but I also need to acknowledge and address how infidelity is the actual reason as to why I'm in this situation right now. And obviously, that's a stretch of actually, I want to say it's a stretch of a story, but swap out the different scenarios and it's literally the story that I was told. I bring that up though because in having conversations with people, they can help you see, hey, you're fixing a problem that really isn't the problem. You're addressing an issue without addressing the bigger issue. And in all of your self-awareness, honey, you will think that fixing the clothes, getting the job, that will fix it. That's the solution. That's you being accountable, when in reality, it is not. And so you need to be able to have conversations with people who can expose the holes in your fix-it project, because it's not actually going to get you the solution that you ultimately want. So I say all of that to say, be willing to do things differently. I know you are who you are, and I know that you have your boundaries and all of that, and I'm not saying those are bad things. I do believe that it is important for people to accept you for who you are and to not change you or mold you into who they want you to be. But I also think that it's important for us to be willing to acknowledge that we can be who we are, yet also strive for better, also strive for more. And not even in the sense of striving in the sense of always chasing something, but in the sense of I can be better than this. I can do better than this, and I want better for myself than this. And so I just want to encourage you all to take some time in your self-awareness and just consider how being self-aware, as I was saying earlier, is a great starting point. But there's also a whole middle and finish line as well that we have to get to. And it helps us to be able to acknowledge what needs to be changed or what we do that is not the healthiest, not the best, but also be willing to acknowledge that I need to do the work to be able to be better. So I'm not just going to acknowledge it, but I'm actually going to do better, because I am who I am, but I want to be the best version of me. Not this version of me that I'm settling for, not this version of me that is really not even the full version of me, because I have things that I still need to heal from. So I just want to encourage you all in that. I hope that you all took away some good nuggets from this conversation. And this is an ongoing conversation for myself. I'm definitely still learning, growing, maturing. All of that is definitely a process for me. So we are on this journey together. Do not feel bad. Do not feel guilty. be willing to do it differently. Okay? I hope you all have an amazing week. And until next time, be whole, be healed, be authentic. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into A Change of Heart podcast. I hope you were encouraged, and please take a moment to share with a girlfriend, and don't forget to download the episode. Lastly, I would love to connect with you. You can follow me on Instagram at Angel C. Walston and at A Change of Heart podcast. Have an amazing week, and don't forget, be whole, be healed, and be authentic.